who will be the next city prosecutor? Today, we'll hear from both candidates that are running for city prosecutor this November. I want to introduce Keith Kaneshiro and Kevin Takata and welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Malia.
This is the first time that you've actually been on TV together, right?
Yes.
In a conversation format. And so we wanted to give our viewers and the public a chance to hear from both of you because they have a really important decision to make up in, I guess, November 6th. And so how about if we start with Keith, you're the prosecutor now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for prosecutor again?
Okay, I've had over 30 years of law enforcement experience. I was the elected prosecutor from 1989 to 1996, 2 terms. I worked as a deputy prosecutor, then I worked in the Attorney General's office, created the Criminal Justice Division, and I also worked as a director of public safety for the prison systems and state law enforcement. And I decided to run 2 years ago because I felt that there were things that needed to be done, that attention needed to be focused on certain crime problems. And that's why I decided to come back, and I got elected 2 years ago. So I've been the prosecuting attorney for 10 years.
So you were actually, before it was Charles Marslin, then you came in, then Peter Carlisle, and then you returned.
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
Good. Just to give people the history. Okay, Kevin. Now tell us about yourself. You worked at the city prosecutors. You work for the state attorney general now. Tell us about yourself and why you want to run for prosecutor.
First, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I've been a prosecutor continuously for over 25 years. During that time, I've been fortunate enough to obtain the most homicide convictions in Hawaii. I've also supervised the largest division in the office, the Trials Division, which contains anywhere from 25 to 30 prosecutors. I was the commander of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I train prosecutors locally, nationally, internationally. And I've also been fortunate enough to be appointed to numerous committees by the Hawaii Supreme Court.
Great. Okay. Well, a lot of experience, so that's good for the public. They have 2 good choices this coming election. Tell us a little bit about some of the big issues that you think the prosecutor would be taking on either now or in the future when this coming November and after that. What do you think are the biggest issues that Hawaii is facing in terms of crime?
Well, I think that one of the big issues, and that's the reason why I came back, is the drug abuse problem. We have an ICE epidemic, and we need to address it. And the prosecutor's office should lead the way in addressing that problem. And so since coming back, what I've done was we're doing nuisance abatement proceedings, which is the first time the prosecutor's office is doing that. It's a law that I wrote when I was a prosecutor the first time, where we work with international prosecutors because the ingredients for ICE comes from out of state, so we have to work together with them. So I have an International Drug Summit in October of 2011, and I want to expand on a drug court program that I created way back in 1995, and because we need to provide treatment as opposed to just incarcerating all the drug offenders. So what I was able to do was get increased funding for the drug court program this past legislative session. So that's one of the issues that has to be addressed. The other one was elder abuse. I've seen a lot of elder abuse going on, and we've doubled the size of the prosecutor's elder abuse unit. We tripled the amount of cases, and we are now educating the banks, financial institutions, and other senior groups as to how to spot elder abuse and report elder abuse. These are some of the things we need to increase victim services. That's why I created this courthouse dog program, in which the courthouse dog would help child victims tell their side of the story. And also, in addition to that, we've had created a long-term transitional housing for domestic violence victims so they can escape the environmental violence. These are some of the things I've worked on in the past 2 years, and I intend to continue working on.
Great. Kevin?
With advances in technology, it provides us tools to make our lives better, but it also puts tools in the hands of criminals. It allows them to commit crimes in new ways. But in doing so, they also leave evidence. So we need to train the next generation of prosecutors to be able to use these new tools, but also to be able to get that into evidence at court. So they have to be trained on what is required to lay what we call foundation. Now, a lot of information is now contained on computers, cell phones, and through the internet. Prosecutors need to understand how that evidence is created, how to retrieve it properly, and how to get it into court. And that's one area I would like to address. Also, we need to look at bringing back the sex assault team. Just putting people on paper saying you're assigned to that team doesn't mean that's happening. 3 of the so-called deputies assigned to sex assaults also assigned to courtrooms. So they're not getting a full complement of sex assault cases. And we also need to bring back the community prosecution unit. This is a unit that goes into the community and hears what the concerns are and brings it back to the office so the office can address that. That's not happening now, and we need to do that.
So more interaction between the community.
Well,
Go ahead.
let me say that as far as computer crimes, our deputies are already trained to do that because we are doing cyber crimes. We have an excellent unit doing that, Chris Van Mata, and we have another deputy assigned plus paralegals. They already know how to bring in evidence laying foundation for cyber crimes. On the sex assault unit, the deputies are specifically assigned to sex assault. They do vertical prosecution, and they do sex assault within a particular courtroom. In fact, the sex assault unit that I have are in several courtrooms because they do vertical prosecution. This is a unit that was disbanded by the previous administration, and what I did was I brought it back together, and I have deputies specifically assigned to do vertical prosecution on sex assault. So we're already doing these things.
So in terms of sex assault, how many sex assaults do you think there are approximately a year, and how much is the backlog? I know I've interviewed sex assault victims, and some of them it takes just 6 months or a year just to get so I've heard, but correct me if I'm wrong, just to get the kit processed that has to do with DNA. Is that still the case, or is there a kind of catching up on the backlog?
Well, I don't know how many cases are committed each year, but the fact that simply you have deputies on paper that may appear to be assigned to sex assault doesn't mean they're assigned to sex assaults, because one of the things going on now is that those deputies are assigned to specific courtrooms. Those courtrooms handle all type of cases, which means they cannot be specializing in the cases that they should be specializing. And sex assaults are very difficult, and prosecutors often don't want to do those cases. It takes a specific type of prosecutor to have an interest in it and to be able to stay there long enough to develop the experience. For example, when you're handling crimes against children, that's very emotionally draining. You need special people who are willing to commit to prosecuting those cases, and that has to be brought back.
We have it. The deputies who assign sex assault cases are only assigned sex assault cases. That's all they do. Sex assault cases, if it goes to a different courtroom, then they'll go to different courtrooms. But that's all they do. They're not assigned other types of cases. And we have deputies that handle the case from the beginning to the end. Now, on sex assault, on how many cases, what we've seen is the increase of child sex assault cases. And there's 2 issues when you talk about the sex assault kits. The child sex assault cases, for one thing, what we've done is we're working with Child Protective Services now. First time that the prosecutor's office have been in dialogue with them. So we're working with them. We meet every month to discuss cases, to better prosecute sex assault cases, the child victims. We also have the courthouse dogs, which allows the child victim to tell their story on sex assault. One of the reasons a case takes so long is because the investigation takes a while before it comes into office. Then a prosecutor is specifically assigned, because they do vertical prosecution, they'll screen the case, and they're very experienced. The sex kit, I think it's a matter, I think you should ask the police department, because we've asked them to process. And the reason why it's not processed is until they have a suspect. From my understanding, they don't process the kits, and that's why.
That's why there's a backlog.
That's why there's a backlog in the kit, because they don't have a suspect in the investigation.
Okay. So they don't. It's not like CSI where they do the background check, run it through a system, and do a hit. It's different, huh?
It's different. It's not like television.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that we have when we go to trial.
Yeah.
Because the jury expect everything to be like CSI, and
That's
it's
right.
not. It's not done like
I've heard
CSI.
that. I went to Chaminade and we took those classes, and that's what they told us right up front. They said, "This is not, CSI. This is real life. The whole trial can't be wrapped up in 1 hour." So
Yes.
not always, anyway. Okay, well, let me see. I wanted to just, you mentioned drug court. We can talk about drug court if you want, but also there's something that kind of goes along with drug court. I guess it's hope probation, and I know it's been controversial because. I know we've had Judge Alm on this show, and he started Hope Probation, and it's kind of spreading across the country, but there's also controversy behind it, whether or not it's effective or if it's taking too many people into the program and maybe taking away some other resources. So throw this at you. Who wants to talk about that? Go ahead.
I'm a strong supporter of Hope Probation. In fact, I was in on the initial meeting with Judge Alm. We happen to be friends. And I helped develop the form that's now currently being used that makes it very easy for probation officers to file motions to revoke or set aside the deferral or probation period. The philosophy behind drug court is very sound. It's that you must have immediate consequences for violations of probation. What was happening before that, and the reason why the program was created, was that someone would be on probation for 3 or 4 years. There would be a number of violations committed, but nothing would happen until the very end. Then probation would be revoked, and that person would often be resentenced to a new 5-year term. Now, that didn't benefit the defendant or the probation officer. The defendant didn't benefit because there weren't immediate consequences to correct his or her behavior. The probation officer and the courts didn't benefit from that because now you've extended a 5-year term to something a lot more than 5 years, taking a lot more resources away from other cases. So the philosophy is very sound. It's not only been adopted in other states, but Judge Alm has been asked to go to other countries and bring his concept of drug court there. Hope probation. So the philosophy is very sound. Again, it's nothing new. You have to let someone know when they've done something wrong right away that this is wrong and you're going to have to go to jail for 2 days, a week, a month until you correct your behavior. If you wait too long, the consequences and the violation, they're not put together by those defendants.
Go ahead.
Well,
You've been a little critical of Hope, right?
I
And
have been.
supportive too. Yeah, so go
I have
ahead.
been supportive of Hope Probation because, of course, Steve Allen is a friend of mine. He worked under me as a prosecutor. Hope Probation, when it started off, is a good concept if you keep it small. And he kept it small at about 200. And how they monitor them is they give them drug tests every week and the immediate consequences. What's happened now is it has expanded to over 2,000 people on Hope Probation. As a result, you cannot supervise all these people, and they're not supervised. What's happening, if you look in midweek and those periodicals, you can always find Hawaii's Most Wanted. And most of these guys are Hope Probation violators. So because it's too big of a program, people are violating the conditions of Hope Probation, and that's expanding a lot of the resources. If the sheriffs go out and arrest them, serve the bench warrants, they sit around in jail, then they come back, they place back on probation. So the people who are violating Hope Probation actually should be going to prison already. There are failures in Hope Probation program, but what's been done now, and I'm glad you mentioned drug court, is now Judge Alm is putting these people who failures in Hope Probation into drug court. Probation deals with people who have been through the criminal justice system already. Drug court is to prevent people from going into the criminal justice system. You catch them early on. So Hope Probation is taking away these very valuable bid space from the people that we want to prevent from coming into the criminal justice system. Plus, the drug court provides treatment. Hope Probation does not provide treatment. And you need to have treatment for drug offenders. And that's my criticism of Hope Probation, the fact that it's grown too large, expending too much resources, and it's taking up vital bed space of people who really need drug treatment.
Okay, so what do you think the answer is?
I think you cut back. You cut back on the amount of people in Hope Probation. You separate drug court from Hope Probation. Don't keep it under one judge, because the judge is going to see what, he wants to make his program look good, so he uses it as it put the people in drug court and hurts the drug court program.
Hope Probation is working. There are going to be failures in any program, but to say because there are some failures, the whole program is a failure, I don't think is fair to the program itself. And the answer for most of these people who are using drugs is not to throw them in jail. That just requires more resources, and that's not really treatment. And people in Hope Probation are mandated to seek drug treatment, so that's not correct.
They're not really mandated to seek drug treatment. What they're told is to don't use drugs, and we're going to test you every week. If you test positive, we'll arrest you and put you in jail. The people who are mandated for drug treatment are people in drug court, not Hope Probation, drug court. And that's where the program is most effective. Drug court has a 5% recidivism rate, repeat offenders. Hope Probation has a 55% recidivism rate. So that program, because it's grown too large, is not as successful.
Drug court is a program where either you fail or you succeed. If you succeed, then your conviction is wiped off. If you fail, you go directly to jail. So it's either you have no conviction or you go to jail. Hope Probation offers just that, an alternative hope treatment.
Okay, I want to move on to another controversial subject, if that's okay with you. The Justice Reinvestment Act is something that the governor came up with, I guess, and in conjunction with, I believe it was Pew Foundation, right? And they came to the legislature, and I sat in on pretty much all the meetings where they met with the prosecutors and the judges and so on, and talked about some of the problems that are happening in our justice system, some of the statistics they found, and some suggestions that they had. But in the end, you know, a lot of the prosecutors I've spoken to, even on Kauai just yesterday, the prosecutor there, they're concerned about this program because they believe it's going to let prisoners out of prison early, I guess, and maybe put more people on the street that aren't supposed to be there. What is your opinion of it?
You want me to go first?
Sure, either way,
Okay.
it doesn't matter.
Well, I was the prime critic of Justice Reinvestment Initiative, and the reason I was a critic was because that program was designed to get prisoners out of prison, to cut down the cost of incarceration. Public safety was not a goal of that program. And I started testifying at the legislature. The Senate, senators listened to me. The House listened to me. Senator Sloan, the only Republican in the Senate, was a prime supporter of what I was saying. He listened. Senator Clayton, who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, listened. And they understood my concerns. You cannot just bring inmates back from the mainland and release people without, as they said, they needed supervision, but without supervision, without programs. So when I went to the legislature, what I said was, before you do this, you have to set up the infrastructure. You have to have money for programs, for like drug court and other treatment programs, and you have to have money for new parole and probation officers to supervise the people that you release. Until you establish the infrastructure, you cannot release these people into the public because you're going to jeopardize public safety. And guess what? The legislature listened, and they funded the appropriations for parole officers, probation officers, and for treatment programs because they felt, they agree with me that you need to have the infrastructure first.
Go ahead.
I have some concerns because this is a new program and it hasn't been tested. However, I also understand that the role of the prosecutor, once a law has been passed, is to work with that law. And that's what I'm willing to do. You know, if they have the proper means to measure risk, and that's an important part of the program, and that's a good tool, then maybe they can assess who is least likely to commit crimes. But I have some concerns about those tools because from my experience, assessing risk is something very difficult, even for experts. But again, I understand that this is already the law. And as a prosecutor, you take an oath to uphold the law, so it'd be my duty to work within it. I think because of the prosecutor's opposition to this program, the prosecutor jeopardized over $1 million worth of funding this year, and that's not the way to work with the legislature.
What are the biggest successes and failures that you see? I know this is just being implemented, but what do you see as like the biggest potential success for this and the biggest potential concern, I should say?
For this,
Yeah.
it is the fact that the infrastructure will not be set up soon enough, and they're going to start releasing inmates. Now, I don't know what Kevin is talking about the law. This is the law. What we're testifying is to what should become the law. And what became the law was the funding, the appropriation for the infrastructure, which is good, and that's what I agreed to. And also in some other provisions in which they'll do assessment, things like that, but they can always do this anyway. The probation department, the parole department can do assessment. And there was no need for a law to do that. So I don't know what law she expects me to follow, but one of the reasons I went to the legislature was to make sure the law that comes out of the legislature is a law that's going to ensure public safety.
My understanding is that the governor and others want to bring back inmates from Arizona and other mainland facilities.
That was going to be my next question, yeah.
Those are some of the most dangerous inmates we have. I know that from experience because a lot of people I prosecuted are there. And that's why they're there, because they're serving long terms. So it's cheaper to keep them there. So if you're bringing them back, obviously those are not the people you're going to release. You're going to have to look for those people in minimum or low security facilities and determine who among these people can we hope be released safely. In doing that, the bill provides for a tool that must be adopted to measure the risk and to release those that prevent the least amount of risk. My concern is how do we measure that? Because those even incarcerated here are in jail for a reason, because they either pose a risk to persons or property. Now there seems to be some sort of misperception that we incarcerate first-time drug offenders. From my 10 years of experience supervising a trial division, where I saw almost all the cases during that period involving first-time drug offenders, we didn't do that. The one shining spot about the bill is it provides that if you're caught for a second time possessing drugs, then jail is not automatic. We're going to give you another chance. But we were doing that at the prosecutors when I was there also. We understood that this was an addiction, and jail wasn't necessarily the solution because we needed the space for other dangerous people. So we gave that person a chance and said, look, we'll agree to either reduce the jail term, but these are the other things you must do. But again, I think we have to look carefully at who's going to be assessing the risk, what tools they're going to be using, and how these people are going to be monitored in our community.
A lot of people are concerned about the governor talking about bringing prisoners home. I mean, I know there's support for it from maybe some of the families that are have their loved ones in prison. But the public in general, when you talk about bringing prisoners home, but then also maybe releasing some people because we don't have enough space, is that something you think is a wise idea, or do you think that we need to use the Arizona prisons or the prisons outside Hawaii, or do you think we should be building more prisons here? Is that something you can tackle as a prosecutor?
As the director of public safety, I was the one who sent the prisoners out of state to Arizona, to all these different states, to open up the beds over here, because our system was overcrowded, and as a result, people were not going to prison. As a result of sending them away, we opened up bed space over here, and it was cheaper for them to be away. And I know what kind of inmates are there because I was involved in the process of having them shipped to out of state. As far as bringing them back here, I have some concerns. You can't just release them when you bring them back here. Now, I was an advocate when I was director of public safety to build a new prison. And we had convinced the legislature, they had provided funding for planning and design, and there was a plan designed to build a new prison. Everything was in place. The legislature was in favor of building a new prison here in Hawaii, because the plan was we send the inmates away for 3 years, and after we build a new prison here, then bring them back into the new prison here. That plan, after I left the Department of Public Safety, was scuttled. They decided
Probably a lot of people don't want the prison in their backyard. That's what we always hear, right?
Right.
Right.
And there's a lot of land outside on neighbor islands where you can build a new prison.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be explored, and I think the legislative session, they need to explore that possibility of building a new prison here in Hawaii.
Go ahead.
As I stated, the people that you bring back from the mainland are not the ones that should be released because they're the most dangerous. Now, whether a new prison is to be built, that's up to the legislature, but the question is what form will it take? Is it going to be an expensive maximum security prison, or is it going to be something less than that? Because maximum security prisons are something that the state cannot afford at this time. So those we bring back will probably be placed in Halawa. Are there prisoners in Halawa that we can move to less secure facilities? That I don't know. I don't know what the census is there. But these are difficult questions that we need to answer during these times. And again, money is a prime concern. Also, where are you going to build it? If you put the prison on a neighbor island, but that's a minimum security prison like Oahu Community Correctional Center, there's a problem in bringing them to court, which adds to expense. So all of these things have to be considered and thought out before you make these decisions.
Well, I think this question should be thought out. And I think the prosecuting attorney should have an opinion as to what needs to be done, not be wishy-washy. Come out and say whether you want a new prison or you don't want a new prison. And tell the legislature what you want in a new prison. We only have about 20-something maximum security prisoners in Hawaii. So we don't have a huge prison population maximum security. The majority are minimum security classification. So I know when he's talking about building a big maximum security, we don't need a big maximum security prison. We need a medium security prison with programs in the prison.
Okay, go
A
ahead.
prosecutor has to understand his role in society. It's easy to constantly ask for more resources, say I need this, this, and this. But where is the money coming from? Is it coming from education? Is it coming from health? Is it coming from other social benefits? And explain to those people that, look, I think we need to build a prison. We're taking money away from you. I mean, the decision is not that simple.
We only have about a minute left in the show, so I want to throw this out before I give you a few seconds to wrap up. But management style, how are you going to differ? You've had some turnover definitely in your office that we've talked about before, and you have been critical of that. So give us the 20 seconds on that.
Well, there's no mass exodus of deputies from our office. People leave and vacancies are created, and vacancies were filled when people left office. Some people were not happy working on Saturdays, doing training on Saturdays. They were not happy being supervised, so they left. But the positions were filled with very skilled, dedicated, and hardworking attorneys. In fact, 13 of the new hires were they were clerks for judges. But the most important is the people who want to be in the office, who are working for public safety, are working in the office.
I will listen to people and treat them with dignity and respect. If you don't consider over half the office leaving a mass exodus, I don't know what you would. And that involves over 150 years worth of experience. You don't replace that overnight. Clerks that work for judges are fresh out of law school, and that's why the prosecutor's office is losing cases at a record pace.
Well, we're not losing cases. I don't know what case he's referring to, but we haven't lost cases, and public safety has never been jeopardized.
Okay, I know we could go on for another hour, but we're out of time. I want to ask you to tell people your website and maybe one phrase or few words about what you stand for. Go ahead.
Well, I stand for accountability and responsibility. The prosecuting attorney has to be accountable and responsible for everything his office is involved in. I also stand for the prosecuting attorney should be the voice of public safety.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
My website is kevintakata.com. There's also a Facebook link. And my message to the community is, we are not as safe as we could and should be today as we were 2 years ago.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today. I think people got a really good impression of both of you, and I appreciate your time. This has been Malia Zimmerman, News Behind the News. Aloha.